launches FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this thing. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. I just see on Twitter. I probably butchered his name. But he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in. And
probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was handled. Now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal, and we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden, it starts this firestorm because people are like, everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few.
I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1 and then you're sending $1 to all.
Like what exactly, like what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to. Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it. Right. It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was and it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people like kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they'd like to get paid.
Good person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems.
But
these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices, and then after he made his money that way, and it just was kind of. I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks,
bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
Fine, but FTX was sort of the worst offender. Let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. There were some margin trading accounts, and I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you, and they wanted. And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through them for like all these and like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. So we were warning people, hey, this is probably insolvent. Get your money out. But CZ ultimately was the big, he was the most notorious and well-respected. He'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. With crypto is sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So, like, look at the Turkish lira. You're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat, found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You know, you could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But what? It's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your not having sort of like it's maybe not big enough. You know, they're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. And wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, you know, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? Like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX. Wow. Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
Was a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
So the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But that person eventually is the son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they lateral like dollars or like some asset? We'll give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin. And that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by Caesar, or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, you know, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable. You believe, you know, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like you do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like, they had a Serum token, which they control most of.
Finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs, and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box. These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? All these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. Yeah, tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum.
Do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me as well as I think it's an important thing.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And
he's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States. Well, technically, not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
Somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange. It's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. Washington, and I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like, it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be. The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no
regulated, like if he was doing this, like Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC. Said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that money and go start trading with it unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. It's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused like scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work because if you're great, there's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh, something. Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why Ethereum on? What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about give you this yield. He starts explaining like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme, and so ultimately Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stopped short.
And a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that it was amazing that he felt like he could.
He lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for. Of ads, like get rich quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis, telling you, they're like 25 years old, telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. Annoying. So
that.
The famous example is like Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded.
Why the celebrities are important, and that's why
huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part, yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, So I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
What are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch and then in regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
myself, they kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the tokens. Do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese.
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it. So ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, right? People in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated.
I don't really understand what's going. Like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, "What is happening? Like, what are they doing?" Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all, inevitable.
It is inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like we're sparring partners. Like, and you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever. People that were standing out and saying this, none of this makes sense.
Right.
And who were those people?
So there were a few people. There were executives, Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish.
Success. 2 months. You're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who comes, he's the son of 2 Harvard lawyers. I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had to store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever, like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. So if you default on that loan, I'm out $1 million. Another way is I ask for, okay, I'll take some equity in the studio if something goes wrong, right? So I cover my butt if you default on it. Now, that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is, it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically, it's almost impossible to trace. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. Pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's
if you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China, like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here, maybe that's a big deal. Or the CEO as of 2020, he hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did everything. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when all the, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time, I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me, I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. Senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to, this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you deal, but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out.
And then when you have him on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and
basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten...
Go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new what that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance to their other friends. They're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people on sticks or something. Like it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? Your balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like I forgot. It's so silly. It's, yeah. You find not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became NFTs for a while. But like, so I eventually like pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers. And I wanted somebody to say that her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down. Because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on. Let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all of that token. Then you sell it off and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. It's like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred. You have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So
Yeah,
how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, this stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of ours, and I'd go because it was like my friends like said, "Hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll go." I was like kind of fascinated, and you'd see these guys,
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
that's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
$10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet?
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies and left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos.
Down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in, so you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors, and that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer to peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams, fight. Like one of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, like take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because the money system has to be safe. Like your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like,
yeah.
or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like just like hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich sim. In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about? I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized like, oh, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives, and I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like, there's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews.
His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet, and he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called, that's what ultimately matters, is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out. And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is like if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. Your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party. And then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not, maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. Victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. There was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what you withdraw. There's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address, because you send it to a different one. And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time. That's right, but
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly, in our current American climate, like everyone loses confidence, everyone sells their FTT tokens, no one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cash. Change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
Gay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, right? The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. Like it's an unimaginable. It's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time.
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore